My father used to say that the best way to learn something was to be thrown into it. No safety net, no hand holding, just the cold water and your own two arms. I was 13 the first time I understood what he actually meant by that. We were driving back from my aunt's place in Columbus. It was late July, the kind of heat that makes the air above the highway shimmer like something is burning underneath the asphalt. My parents were in the front seat. My younger brother was asleep against my shoulder, his mouth open, completely trusting the way only little kids can be. I remember thinking he smelled like sunscreen and grape juice. We stopped at a rest area outside of Dayton. Big one, the kind with a Sparrow and a Cinnabon and a row of vending machines that never quite work right. My dad said, "Everyone out, stretch your legs. We'll be back on the road in 20 minutes." I took my brother to the bathroom, got him a Sprite from the machine, walked him around a little because he always got carsick if he sat right back down after sleeping. By the time we came back outside, the car was gone. I thought I had the wrong row. It happens. Parking lots all looked the same. I walked up and down twice, my brother's hand in mine, the sun already starting to drop but still mean. Then I saw my dad's blue coffee thermos sitting on top of a trash can near the entrance, just sitting there, like a marker. I stood there for a moment and I did not understand what I was looking at. Then my phone buzzed. A text from my mom. "Find your way back. You're smart. Figure it out." That was it. No address, no money in my pocket. 63 miles from home with my 9-year-old brother who had started asking me where Dad's car went. I told him they had to move the car to a different spot. I smiled when I said it. I was 13 and I already knew how to make my voice sound calm when everything inside me was not. Here's what I want you to understand before I go any further. This was not a one-time thing. This was not some misguided parenting experiment they read about in a magazine. This was a pattern that had been running my entire life, and I had been so inside of it for so long that I had almost convinced myself it was normal. When I was 7, I forgot my lunch at home. My mom drove past the school 3 times. I saw her car, I waved, and kept going. She told me later it was to teach me responsibility. I sat in the cafeteria with nothing while the lunch aide pretended not to notice. A girl named Stephanie split her sandwich with me without making a big deal out of it. I still think about Stephanie sometimes. When I was 10, I got a part in the school play. A small part, but still. My parents did not come. My dad said he had a work thing. My mom said she would catch the next one. There was no next one. I stood on that stage and scanned the audience the way you do when you're 10 and you still believe people are coming. And then I stopped scanning and I just did the play. When I was 12, I brought home a report card that was almost perfect. 4 A's, 1 A minus, 1 B plus. My dad looked at it for a long time and said, "What happened in English?" I used to think I was the problem. That if I could just be smarter, tougher, less needy, they would soften. I spent years calibrating myself to a frequency they never actually broadcast on. So, the rest stop outside of Dayton, I looked at my brother and I made a decision. I was not going to cry in front of him. I was not going to let him know that the bottom had just dropped out of something. I walked us back inside to the Sparrow counter, and I asked the woman working the register if she could help me. I told her we needed to call someone. She was maybe 50, thick-soled shoes, hair pulled back, and she looked at me for a second with an expression I could not quite read. Then she picked up the phone behind the counter and handed it to me without asking any questions. I called my grandmother, my dad's mom. She was 71 and she did not drive highways anymore. But she answered on the second ring and I told her where we were and she said, "Don't move. I'm calling your uncle." My uncle was there in 40 minutes. He walked in and found us sitting at a table with 2 slices of pepperoni pizza that the Sparrow woman had given us and not charged for. My brother had eaten his completely and was asking if he could get another. My uncle looked at me and I looked at him and something passed between us that neither of us ever really talked about out loud. On the drive home, my uncle did not say much. He asked if we were okay. I said yes. He said okay. He turned on the radio and my brother fell asleep again. And I watched the Ohio fields go dark out the window, and I thought very clearly, like a sentence being printed one letter at a time, "I am going to get out of here." My parents were home when we arrived. My dad was watching TV. My mom was in the kitchen. They did not apologize. My dad said he knew I could handle it. My mom said it was important to know that you can solve problems on your own. My uncle stood in their living room and said something I had never heard an adult say to my parents before. He said, "What you did tonight was not okay." Just like that, quiet and flat, the way you say something when you were completely certain of it. My dad laughed. He actually laughed. He said my uncle had always been soft. My uncle looked at me one more time. Then he left. I spent the next 5 years doing what you do when you are a kid, and you have no other option. You stay. You adapt. You get very good at disappearing inside a house while still being physically present in it. I kept my grades up because I had already decided that grades were my exit ramp. I worked at a diner on weekends starting at 15, saving every dollar in a bank account my parents did not know about. I did not tell them about my college applications. I did not tell them when I got in. I told them the morning I left for orientation. My bags were already in my car, a 2003 Honda Civic I had bought myself for $4,200, with diner money and a small loan from my grandmother that she told me was a gift and not a loan. My mom looked at my bags and said, "You could have given us more notice." I said, "I'm giving you notice now." My dad said he hoped I was not planning to come running back when things got hard. I said I was not. I drove to school with the windows down even though it was September and cold, and I played the same song 3 times in a row, and somewhere around the state line, I started crying and I could not tell you exactly what I was crying about, because it was not sadness. It was something I did not have a word for yet. Relief, maybe. Or the feeling of something very heavy being set down after you've been carrying it so long you forgot it had weight. College was the first place I ever felt like a person who got to choose things. I chose my roommate, eventually my friends, my major. I studied social work, which surprised exactly no one who knew my history. My apartment junior year, my schedule, my Saturday mornings, the way I wanted to spend a quiet evening. I chose all of it and it felt extravagant every single time, even the small stuff. Choosing what to eat for dinner without someone telling me my choice was wrong. Choosing to call someone back or not. Choosing silence when I wanted it. I stayed in touch with my grandmother. I stayed in touch with my uncle. I did not stay in touch with my parents. This is the part where people always want more explanation than I have to give. They want a dramatic final conversation. A confrontation where everything is said, a door slammed, a voice raised, a specific last straw they can point to. It was not like that. It was a slow and very deliberate stepping back. I returned fewer calls. I made fewer trips home. The calls became texts. The texts became holidays only. The holidays became nothing. My mom left a voicemail on my 23rd birthday that I listened to twice and did not return. She said she hoped I was doing well. She said she and my dad had been thinking about me. She said she wanted me to know that all the hard lessons they had taught me were because they loved me and wanted me to be strong. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time after that. There's a specific kind of grief in hearing someone describe what they did to you as love and realizing they fully believe it. They are not pretending, they are not performing. They have constructed an entire story in which they are the good guys, the architects of your resilience, the ones who made you who you are. And the terrible thing is, they are partially right. I am who I am partly because of what they put me through, but not in the way they think. Not because the cold water taught me to swim, because I had to decide over and over again that I was worth more than what they were offering. And that decision, made in a Sparrow at a rest stop when I was 13, made in a diner kitchen at 15, made on a highway on-ramp at 18, that decision was mine. They did not make it. I made it despite them. I did not call her back. I built something, slowly and without much fanfare. A career in child welfare, which is as hard as it sounds, and I would not trade it. A small house in Portland, Oregon that I own, that I painted the inside of myself, that has a garden in the back that I am terrible at, but refuse to give up on. A person I love who knows my whole story, and has never once implied that I should have tried harder with my family. Friends who are chosen family in the truest sense of that phrase. I was 31 on a Tuesday in March when my phone started ringing. My dad, first. I watched it ring. Then my mom. I watched that ring too. Then a number I did not recognize. I found out later it was my aunt, the one in Columbus, calling from her work phone. Then my dad again. By the end of the day, there had been 22 attempts across 3 numbers. I know because I counted them later, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea that had gone cold, going through my missed calls the way you inventory something after a storm. I did not call back that day. The next morning, there were 9 more. My uncle texted me separately. Not on their behalf, I want to be clear about that. He texted me to say that my grandmother was in the hospital, that she had had a stroke 2 days before and was stable, but that things were uncertain, that he thought I would want to know, regardless of everything else. I drove to the hospital. 6 hours. I got there in the evening and my grandmother was awake, smaller than I remembered, her left side weak but her eyes completely sharp. She held my hand and said, "You came." I said, "Of course I came." My parents were in the waiting room when I came out. I had known they would be there. I had prepared myself for it the way you prepare for a difficult weather system, not by hoping it will not happen, but by deciding in advance how you will move through it. My mom stood up when she saw me. She looked older. They both did. My dad had less hair. My mom's hands were shaking a little, though I do not know if that was nerves or something else. She said, "We've been trying to reach you." I said, "I know." She said, "We've missed you." I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had texted me, "Find your way back," when I was 13 years old and standing in a parking lot with my little brother 63 miles from home, with no money and no plan and no reason to believe anyone was coming. I said, "I know you believe that." My dad took a step toward me. He started to say something about the past, about how things could be different, about how family is family. I said, "I'm here for Grandma, that's why I'm here." And then I went back into her room and I sat with her until visiting hours ended and I drove to a Holiday Inn 3 miles away and I lay on top of the covers and I stared at the ceiling for a long time. Not because I was second guessing anything. I was not. I knew exactly who I was and exactly what I had built and exactly why I had built it the way I had. I stared at the ceiling because grief is strange and it does not always arrive on schedule and it does not always attach itself to the obvious things. I was not grieving the parents in that waiting room. I was grieving the parents I had needed and never had. Those are two different losses and only one of them can be fixed. And it cannot be fixed by them calling me 22 times on a Tuesday. My grandmother came home from the hospital 11 days later. I was there when they discharged her. I helped her get settled. I stayed for 4 days and cooked things she liked and watched her game shows with her in the evenings and let her tell me stories about when my dad was young, which she did because she loves him even though she knows exactly who he is, and I love her for that complexity. Before I left, she held both my hands in hers and looked at me the way she always has, like she can see something in me that she is proud of. And she said, "You turned out good, sweetheart, in spite of everything." I said, "I had help." She said, "You had yourself. That counts most." I drove back to Portland, back to my house and my failed garden, and my partner and my work and my chosen people. My dad has not tried to call again. My mom sent a card, actual paper, actual stamp, that said she hoped we could find our way back to each other someday. I put it in a drawer. I did not throw it away. I did not call her. I have thought a lot about what I want to say about all of this, now that I am far enough away from the worst of it to say anything clearly. I think about the Sparrow woman who handed me the phone without asking questions. I think about my uncle standing in my parents' living room saying what you did was not okay in that flat, certain voice. I think about my grandmother saying you turned out good in spite of everything and how I needed to hear that more than I knew. I think about the people who show up quietly without announcement, who do the small thing at the right moment, the woman who split her sandwich, the man who drove 40 minutes without making you feel like a burden. I think that love is not a test, it is not a bet. It is not a lesson delivered at your expense. It does not leave you in a parking lot and call it character building. I know who I am. I know what I came from and what I chose instead. And I know that the version of me standing in that rest stop at 13, holding my brother's hand, telling him everything was fine when it was not. She deserved someone to come back for her. So I did. Eventually. It just took me a while to figure out that the someone who needed to come back was me. I've thought about cause and effect a lot over the years. Not in any abstract way, just the plain, observable kind. The kind where you look back at a chain of events and you can see, clearly, how one thing produced the next. My parents believed that hardship delivered without warning was the same thing as wisdom. They were wrong. What they were actually doing every time they pulled away the floor and called it a lesson was teaching me something they never intended to teach, that I could not count on them, that I had to build my own ground, and that the sooner I started, the better. So I did. That is the thing they never accounted for. When you raise a child to survive without you, sometimes she actually does. I think about my uncle standing in that living room, saying what he said in that flat and certain voice. He did not raise his voice. He did not make a speech. He just said the true thing plainly and then he left. I have tried to carry that with me. The idea that integrity is not loud. It does not need an audience. It just needs to be said, even when nobody around you is going to receive it well. My uncle did not change my parents that night, but he changed something in me. He showed me that it was possible to see a wrong thing clearly and name it without flinching, and that has been worth more to me than almost anything else I was handed in that house. And my grandmother, still the sharpest person in any room she enters, telling me I turned out good in spite of everything. I have held that sentence like a small stone in my pocket for years, not because I needed her approval, but because she was the first person in that family who ever described what I had done as something that took real effort. My parents framed my survival as proof of their method. My grandmother saw it as proof of mine. That difference matters. It is the difference between someone taking credit for your strength and someone actually witnessing it. I do not think my parents are monsters. I have worked long enough in child welfare to know what actual monsters look like, and my parents are not that. They're people who confuse control with care, who mistook fear for respect, who genuinely believed that making things hard was the same as making things good. That belief caused real damage. It caused damage that I have spent years quietly repairing in myself, sometimes in a therapist's office, sometimes just on a long drive with the windows down. But I do not carry it as bitterness anymore. Bitterness is heavy and I got tired of the weight. What I carry instead is this: the understanding that how you treat someone during their most vulnerable moments is who you actually are. Not your intentions. Not your theories about toughness. The moment itself. My father left a 13-year-old girl at a highway rest stop and called it education. That moment told me everything I needed to know, and I spent the next 18 years acting on that information. I built a life that is genuinely mine, chosen, tended, full of people who show up. That did not happen to me. I made it happen one decision at a time, starting with the decision I made in that sparrow holding my brother's hand. And I think that is the only thing worth saying about any of this. You do not have to become what was done to you. The gap between those two things, what happened to you and who you decide to be, that gap is yours. It belongs entirely to you. Nobody can take it and nobody can fill it but you. I know which side of it I am standing on.